Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack an absolutely wild, true survival story about a little boy in rural Montana, way over in the United States. Now, especially for you guys tuning in from across Asia, maybe from a super bustling, warm city, I really need you to use your imagination today. We're traveling to a place packed with massive, dense forests, wild animals, and freezing weather. It's a story of danger, bravery, and it actually holds a huge life lesson for all of us.
So let's kick things off with a massive question to put you right in the shoes of our hero. Just picture your absolute favorite place to play. It's warm, it's sunny, and it feels completely safe, right? But then, literally in the blink of an eye, the sun vanishes, the temperature drops, and you are totally alone in a dark, scary wilderness. What would you do? How would you survive? Well, that is the exact terrifying reality our young hero had to face.
All right, part one, the edge of the yard. This is where the whole thing begins. Let's meet our main character, Ryker. He's just your normal, super curious 3-year-old kid. He's got this bright red hair and a massive, absolutely massive love for bugs. To him, the entire world is just one giant scavenger hunt for cool rocks and creepy crawlies. And on this particular day, he's just playing in his front yard in Troy, which is a tiny town in northwestern Montana, right up against the wild woods.
But here's the thing. There was a huge difference between the super fun adventure Ryker thought he was having and the terrifying reality of those Montana woods. You see, through a 3-year-old's eyes, he just saw cool sticks, fun places to explore, basically a giant playground. But the truth? It was a dense, thick pine forest that literally acts like a giant, confusing maze.
Moving on to part two. Just a few steps, because that's really all it took.
Now, his parents had set a really clear, super strict boundary to keep him safe. The rule was simply, do not walk past the edge of the yard into the thick pine forest. Pretty straightforward, right? But Ryker spotted something shiny or interesting just a few feet past that invisible line, and he just decided to ignore the boundary. He didn't see any big, scary monsters, so he figured, hey, what's the harm?
Well, things went wrong unbelievably fast, basically in 3 simple steps. First, he spots a cool bug. Second, he takes just a few tiny steps past that boundary. And third, total disaster. Because the forest is so unbelievably thick, the second he turned around to go back, every single pine tree looked exactly the same. In a matter of minutes, he was completely, hopelessly lost.
Which brings us to part 3, the unseen forest dangers, the fight for survival.
Okay, try to imagine the sensory shift. The sunny yard is gone, the sun sets, and it gets freezing cold. The temperature dropped all the way down to 4 degrees Celsius or about 39 degrees Fahrenheit. For you guys watching in warm cities across Asia, imagine opening up a super cold refrigerator, stepping inside, shutting the door, and having to sleep in there. That is exactly how freezing it was out in those deep woods.
And to make matters so much worse, Ryker was only wearing a light t-shirt and some shorts. He was totally unprepared for that kind of freezing cold. And honestly, as if that wasn't bad enough, severe thunderstorms started rolling in that evening, completely soaking the forest.
Oh, and he definitely wasn't alone out there. That forest is absolutely packed with literal, real-world dangers. We're talking about massive mountain lions and grizzly bears prowling around in the dark. These are top-tier predators. A tiny 3-year-old boy in a t-shirt is unbelievably vulnerable to wild neighbors like that.
The forest can be super tricky. It looks magical to a kid, but it hides a really dark reality. It's almost like a scary fairy tale. These unseen dangers lurk around, like sinister men with angel wings just blending right into the trees. They might look inviting and completely harmless at first glance, but it's a trap, hiding their dangerous nature just to trick a curious kid into wandering way too deep.
Let's look at part 4, the massive aerial search. The whole town jumps into action.
Just think about how agonizingly long this poor kid was out there all by himself. He went missing on a Friday afternoon. He was out there all through Friday night, all through Saturday with those awful storms, and finally all the way into Sunday. Think about how long a normal weekend feels when you're just playing games. Now imagine spending that entire time shivering, starving, and terrified in the pitch black.
Back home, the town rallied together with this incredible response. Over 50 searchers hit the ground. They brought in everything: 4-wheelers, highly trained tracking dogs, high-tech drones, and even big helicopters chopping through the sky, just desperately searching those woods for any sign of a little boy with red hair.
But here is the crazy part.
Despite all that amazing technology, the drones buzzing and the helicopters flying overhead, it just didn't work. The thick pine forest canopy basically acted like a solid green roof. It completely hid Ryker from above, making the entire aerial search totally blind. They had to rely strictly on searching the ground.
So what actually ended up working? Well, it was a classic breadcrumb technique. Remember how much Ryker loved bugs? Searchers walking the trail suddenly noticed something super specific, tiny rocks that had just been flipped over. They realized right away, hey, this is exactly what a kid looking for bugs would do. His little hobby literally left a trail of tiny clues pointing them in the exact right direction.
Part 5. Safe in the shed. Finally, a massive breakthrough.
So roughly 2 miles away from his own front yard, a local family was out checking on their old cabin, and suddenly they hear it, a tiny little boy's voice. It was coming from this old, rusty log cabin generator shed out back. Ryker, who was super hungry, thirsty, and freezing, had miraculously found this shed and crawled inside to hide from the thunderstorms and all those scary predators.
Man, the relief when they finally opened that shed door must have been completely overwhelming. The local sheriff, Darren Short, arrived on the scene and saw just how shaken up Ryker was. The sheriff actually said his eyes lit up, he had the wide-eyed, scared look until he got back to his mom and dad. That was the exact moment a terrified little boy finally knew he was truly safe.
All right, part 6, shields, not prison walls. This is the biggest takeaway of the whole explainer.
Listen, when you're 9 years old, or even 3 years old like Ryker, rules like don't go into the woods or don't cross the street alone can kind of feel like prison walls, just meant to ruin your fun, right? We've all been there. But a boundary is actually a protective shield. It's put there by the adults who love you, specifically to block you from the really dangerous stuff, like freezing storms or hidden predators that you just can't see quite yet.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on long after this explainer is over. What are the boundaries in your own life right now? And more importantly, what invisible dangers are those shields protecting you from today? Thank you guys so much for joining me on this incredible trip to Montana. Stay curious, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.